If part 3 placed us in the quiet room where God leans in, part 4 keeps us there a little longer, because silence is where most believers lose the plot, even though God never loses the connection. And like every good story, we'll start with tension, atmosphere, and a human heart at stake. The land was dry, not the poetic, a little thirsty kind of dry. It was the cracked earth, empty riverbed, animals looking for water, people looking for answers kind of dry. 3.5 years had passed since the heavens last released rain. Farmers had stopped checking the horizon. Merchants had stopped predicting seasons. Even optimism had packed its bags and left town. But Elijah was still praying. He climbs Mount Carmel, kneels low, and begins to intercede. That the real story wasn't the mountain, his posture, or even the rain. The real story was this: he kept returning to prayer even when the sky stayed silent. He tells his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant runs, checks the horizon, and returns. Nothing. Elijah prays again, "Go and look." The servant checks again, and returns, still nothing. This cycle repeats 7 times. Not because God needed 7 reminders, but because Elijah needed to become someone whose faith could outlast unanswered seasons without disconnecting from God's character. Finally, a small cloud appears. It's not impressive, not cinematic, just small. The size of a hint, not a headline. But Elijah reacts like someone who already recognizes God's handwriting. "That's enough," he says. "Rain is coming." The sky wasn't moved by his posture. It was moved by his persistent presence in prayer. Some prayers don't move heaven by strength, they move heaven by return. Now let's shift to Shiloh again, back to Hannah. But this time we'll amplify the emotion, not the volume. Hannah's lips moved, but her voice didn't. Her heart was breaking like waves hitting the inside of a sealed dam. Eli the priest assumed she was drunk, because deep grief looks strange to people who don't understand the language of silent prayer. In that moment, she's essentially saying, "I'm not here to impress God. I'm here because my heart has no other direction left to turn." Eli thought her silence meant she wasn't praying correctly. God thought her silence meant she was finally praying honestly. And before her son Samuel was ever born, Hannah was rebuilt into someone whose prayer life became a template for Scripture. God hears the prayer poured from the soul, even when no sound carries it. The truth is, silence doesn't weaken prayer. An absence of awareness does. This brings us to a modern bedroom, no longer filled with guilt, but with decision. A man once told his pastor, "I don't pray lying down anymore because it makes me feel like I am failing God." The pastor asked him, "Are you failing God, or is guilt narrating a story God never wrote?" That night, the man prayed again, lying down. But this time, differently, he prayed, "God, if silence is part of the script, let it be part of my surrender too. I won't measure my prayer by effort, I'll measure it by direction." And direction became the key. Because prayer is not a physical climb upward, it is a heart turned inward toward God. He slept after prayer that night, not because an answer came instantly, but because presence came close enough to carry peace before the resolution appeared. Let's look at Jonah again, but this time, through the lens of sustained presence. Jonah prayed in darkness, but what did that darkness teach him? The belly of the fish was a womb of consequence, but it was also a sanctuary of sustained presence. Jonah couldn't walk, but he could turn. He couldn't kneel, but he could surrender. He couldn't impress God, but he could stay present long enough for mercy to rewrite his rebellion into obedience. Jonah emerged from that darkness not applauded, but aligned. He didn't get answered because he survived the darkness. He got answered because he prayed inside the darkness without disconnecting. Now we move to the ultimate prayer scene, where silence looked like abandonment, but was actually obedience completed. On the cross, Jesus prays, in essence, Father, I release what's left of me into what has always been yours. And then, heaven stays quiet. For 3 hours of darkness, there is no applause, no intervention, no immediate answer. Just silence, holding space for the greatest surrender moment ever recorded. God didn't leave the scene in the silence. Jesus completed the scene in the silence. So let's tie all of these scenes into one emotional truth. Prayer has 3 phases that most people misread. The first is weakness. We think, I can't pray like this, I'm too weak. But God thinks, you're finally praying honestly. The second is repetition. We think, I keep saying the same thing over and over. God thinks, you keep returning to me. The third is silence. We think, God isn't answering, but God is thinking, I am answering you. I staying with you through it. God doesn't reject weak prayers. He rejects disconnected hearts. God doesn't shame repetition. He honors a returning direction. And God doesn't abandon you in silence. He leans into the presence that survives through that silence without quitting. So if you're praying in the quiet and your heart is still awake, still turned toward Him, still honest, still remembering, still returning, know that God is leaning toward that scene. He is either rewriting it, or He is sustaining you through the length of the rewrite itself. But now the tension grows. If God sustains you in silence, what exactly is prayer rebuilding inside of you while heaven holds quiet? Because God isn't just rewriting endings. He's rewriting the one praying through them, too. And that hidden rebuild might be the strongest part of the story yet. That's where we go next.